All right, we ready to go? Time is 7 o'clock. This is regular session number 38, the Raytown Board of Aldermen, November 11th, 2014. We're going to start off the proceedings tonight with Sue Klotz leading the invocation and Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Father God, what a glorious fall you have given us with the colors of the trees and the changing of the weather. We are reminded that you are always in control and all good things are created by you. Thank you for all the blessings we receive, even though too often we don't remember to let you know that. Thank you for forgiving us. We are here tonight to do the business for our community, and we ask your guidance and discernment in our actions and decisions. Be with each one as they travel home safely to their families and friends. It is in your name we pray. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Alderman Jason Green. Alderman Van Buskirk.
Here.
Alderman Josh Green. Alderman Ertz.
Here.
Alderman Azier. Alderman Mock.
Excused. Azier's excused.
Alderman Mock.
Here.
Alderman Kramer. Alderman Melson. Here. Alderman Emerson.
Here.
Alderman Lightfoot.
Here.
Okay, at this time we'll open the floor to public comments. I don't know if anyone has signed up on the sheet or not, so if anyone in the audience would like to address the alderman on something that is within the control of this board, please come forward at this time. Okay, none appearing, we'll proceed on. A couple of noteworthy events this past week. We celebrated the 6th annual tribute to our veterans here in the city of Raytown this past Sunday. Very well attended. Representative McDonald was there as well. Hats off to Alice Stoll, B.J. Taylor, and all those organizations and individuals involved with that wonderful tribute to our veterans. Had the opportunity last Friday as well to attend the MML board meeting in Jeff City. Had the opportunity after that to meet with mayors from the St. Louis area and the Kansas City area, and we have agreed to join an association with each other and pursue legislation together at the state level, with the two boards acting together rather than opposed to each other. So that was a monumental event for our group of mayors, and the MML meeting was well received as well. So with that, Mahesh, anything to report from your side, sir?
Good evening, Mayor Bauer, Board of Aldermen. Some of the staff member and elected official attended the MPR Fall Conference, and in my opinion, it was well worth. A lot of topics were discussed, particularly on the cyber security. From time to time, I also provide you information regarding the community blood drive. This time it's going to be December 15th from 3 to 6 p.m. at Raytown EMS. Along with the blood drive, EMS staff is also collecting health and beauty aid products such as shampoo, soap, toothbrushes, toothpaste, and deodorant to give it to Laurel Hill Elementary Schools needing these items. They are collecting those items at Raytown EMS. If you're interested in helping support a local elementary school, you're encouraged to do so. And the last item, most of you probably have already met with our new finance director, Martha Munn. She started with the city on November 3rd, and she is back there, if you raise your hand. So when you get a chance to introduce yourself, that would be a opportunity after the meeting. With that, I will conclude the report for tonight.
All right, we'll go to committee reports, and if you also want to chime in with the sessions that were of most interest to you at the NPR conference, this would be a time to do that. Start with Mr. Green. Kramer?
Nothing to report at this time. NPR was good. As everybody said, the cybersecurity issue was very interesting. It's a stark reality of what's going on in the world and the dangers that we face.
Mr. Green, anything?
Nothing to report right now.
Ms. Melson?
I'm just going to let you know that there's a first Suburbs Coalition meeting tomorrow, and then we'll also have a meeting of all the first suburbs coming up really soon, and I will let you all know when that will be.
Perfect. Ms. Emerson?
No report at this time.
Mr. Ertz?
Nothing to report tonight, thank you.
Mr. Van Buskirk?
Nothing to report from the Sales Tax Oversight Committee. I did attend NPR, and certainly all of the keynote speakers were excellent, and some excellent topics, I think very beneficial for us.
Mr. Mock?
Yeah, first off, I'd like to say thank you to our vets. And second off, yes, I did go down to NPR this year and enjoyed it. That's about it. Thank you.
Mr. Lightfoot?
There's no legislative committee report today, but I would say that with the NPR event, the risk management portion I thought to be the most enlightening, particularly the organizational risk and operational risk management techniques. So there was a lot to learn there. The keynote speaker on that was very informative. A lot of good information there about strategic risk and with tactical thinking, how you can get past that. So.
Very good. As Mr. Mock pointed out, we have certainly celebrating today the veterans. And at this time, I'd like to read this proclamation. Whereas November 11th is nationally recognized as Veterans Day, the occasion on which we should remember, recognize, and honor the sacred trust with those who wear the uniform of the United States Armed Forces. From the Minutemen who stood watch over Lexington and Concord, to the service members who currently serve in Iraq, Afghanistan, and other foreign countries, American veterans deserve our deepest appreciation and respect. We recognize that our freedom and the freedoms of millions of others around the world was secured through the bravery and sometimes the ultimate sacrifice of American men and women who have answered the call of duty as members of the United States Armed Forces. Veterans continue to promote a united America through their support of the present-day armed forces and all organizations that share the common purpose of protecting the freedom and integrity of our nation. Veterans encourage civic education and patriotism among our nation's youth in advancing their awareness of the virtues of discipline and selflessness, as well as differences between liberty and license, and democratic peace and the mere absence of war. Veterans seek glory no more than they sought the perilous tests of war, but desire only that their cause be honored and their many sacrifices acknowledged. I, David Byron, Mayor of the City of Raytown, hereby recognize November 11, 2014 as Veterans Day in the City of Raytown and encourage all citizens to join with me in recognizing the valor and sacrifice of our veterans through the appropriate public ceremonies and private prayers. I call upon all area residents, private businesses, and public organizations to continue to display the flag of their nation proudly. In tribute to all of our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guard. Signed the 11th day of November. Thank you. With that, we'll move to the legislative session at this time. We've got just the one item on the consent agenda, that of approval of the October 23rd meeting minutes. Ms. Nelson's got the motion to approve, seconded by Mr. Green. Any discussion before we vote? Call the vote, please.
Alderman Melson?
Yes.
Alderman Josh Green?
Yes.
Alderman Lightfoot?
Yes.
Alderman Mock?
Yes.
Alderman Van Buskirk?
Yes.
Alderman Ertz?
Yes.
Alderman Emerson?
Yes.
Alderman Jason Green? Alderman Kramer?
Abstain.
Very good. We'll move to the regular agenda at this time and ask the clerk to perform the reading on item number 2.
A resolution authorizing and approving the continuation of an existing agreement by and between the City of Raytown, Missouri and Cochran Head, Vick and Company, P.C. for the performance of professional audit services for fiscal year 2014-2015 in an amount not to exceed $43,000.
Mr. Sharma is our city administrator. Is there anything you'd like to add to this?
Mayor Bauer and Board of Aldermen, good evening again. Really nothing to add. This is a continuation of a contract that we have with the audit company for last 5 years. Although during the discussion last year, we have contemplated of sending out an RFQ and maybe going through a bid process. However, with the departure of Mr. Lothry and the lack of a staff, we decided to not to go for a bid item or a bid request for proposal services this year. The staff has been very pleased with the auditors and their work, and I would recommend that the city approve this contract.
Questions of Mr. Sharma?
Motion
Van Busker.
approved. Second.
Been moved by Mr. Van Buskirk, second by Mr. Kramer to approve resolution R27-1714. Any discussion before we vote? Call the vote, please.
Alderman Van Buskirk,
Yes.
Alderman Kramer,
Yes.
Alderman Josh Green,
Yes.
Alderman Jason Green, Alderman Melson, Alderman Melson,
Yes.
Alderman Lightfoot,
Yes.
Alderman Emerson,
Yes.
Alderman Ertz,
Yes.
Alderman Mock,
Yes.
Item number 3, please.
a resolution authorizing and approving the purchase of salt for the purpose of treating roads and bridges in inclement weather from Holiday Sand and Gravel and Independent Salt Company in an amount not to exceed $42,000 for fiscal year 2014-2015.
Mr. Melvin, do you wish to answer any questions on this, sir? Introduce to you Mr. Jim Melvin, our interim Public Works Director. Anything you'd like to add, sir? Okay. Mr. Kramer?
Yeah, and this goes back to when we had municipal committee and Mr. Knoll had realized that the cooperative agreement was actually a more expensive way to go, and to go this route was cheaper for the people of Raytown, and so I fully support it and would make a motion to approve.
Got a motion to approve, seconded by Ms. Melson, original motion by Mr. Kramer. Any further discussion? Item number 3 before we vote. Call the vote, please.
Alderman Kramer,
Yes.
Alderman Melson,
Yes.
Alderman Azier, Alderman Mock,
Yes.
Alderman Jason Green, Alderman Ertz,
Yes.
Alderman Emerson,
Yes.
Alderman Lightfoot,
Yes.
Alderman Josh Green,
Yes.
Alderman Van Buskirk,
Yes.
Item number 4, please.
a resolution authorizing and approving the purchase of fuel from Maher Oil Company within budgeted amounts for fiscal year 2014-2015 off the City of Kansas City, Missouri Cooperative Purchase Contract.
And Mr. Melvin, anything you'd like to add, sir?
This is just an extension of the existing contract that we already have through the cooperative agreement with Maher. It will be the last extension on this year's contract, and there should be a new contract by the time this one expires.
All right, Mr. Mock.
Second.
Mr. Mock has a motion to approve, seconded by Mr. Kramer. Discussion item 4 before we vote. Mrs. Emerson? No, hold it back. You're good. All these lights are flashing up here. Mr. Lightfoot, anything to add, sir?
It is a separate agreement, yes. I'm not really sure. Just a second.
Say hello to Mr. Tony Mason.
The purchase of propane for those vehicles that have been converted is done through we put it out to bid on again, an agreement on a rack price, plus a percentage of profit. And we're with Feral Gas for, I think, the next 3 years for that. Okay? It's propane.
Mr. Kramer, something else you want to add, sir?
No, I was just waiting to know.
All right. No further discussion, Mr. Van Busker?
Again, it's, as Tony said, it is a rack price, and then there's a set profit that they make on, per the agreement. It varies. Seems to be pretty advantageous to us. It's the base price of the gas, whatever the company pays for it, and they get a percentage on top of that at the profit.
Any further discussion? None occurring, ask the clerk to call the vote, please.
Alderman Mock,
Yes.
Alderman Kramer,
Yes.
Alderman Van Busker,
Yes.
Alderman Josh Green,
Yes.
Alderman Lightfoot,
Yes.
Alderman Jason Green, Alderman Melson,
Yes.
Alderman Ertz,
Yes.
Alderman Emerson,
Yes.
Okay, item number 5, please.
a resolution authorizing and approving final payment to Vance Brothers, Inc. for the 2014 lightweight aggregate seal project, accepting all work performed under said contract and authorizing final payment in the amount of $155,426.35.
Mr. Melvin or Mr. Hanson as our city engineer, anything you'd like to add, sir?
Nothing to add. They have completed the 5 neighborhoods. It did underrun on quantity. We didn't have any other streets ready, so we just finished the contract.
Mr. Ertz?
I appreciate this, even go this direction, I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion's been made, seconded by Ms. Emerson. Any discussion before we vote on item number 5? Mr. Lightfoot?
Excuse me. I'd just like to comment that this is a decrease in cost, so typically we're discussing the increase on these kind of projects, so for the public's knowledge, decrease in cost in this one.
Mr. Van Busker?
Yeah. This project comes out of the same fund as the overlay, as well as the street striping and concrete work. So any money left over from this could go for possible overruns on the others. Correct. Yes.
Mr. Kramer? We do need to give training on the lights, so. Okay, I apologize, do we already have a motion on this? Motion has been made. Thank you. Motion been made and seconded. Any further discussion on this item? Call the vote, please.
Alderman Ertz,
Yes.
Alderman Emerson,
Yes.
Alderman Melson,
Yes.
Alderman Kramer,
Yes.
Alderman Jason Green, Alderman Josh Green,
Yes.
Alderman Van Busker,
Yes.
Alderman Lightfoot,
Yes.
Alderman Mock,
Yes.
Okay, item number 6, please.
A resolution authorizing and approving change order number 2 to the agreement by and between the City of Raytown and A&A Concrete Company for the 2014 concrete repair project, accepting all work performed under said contract and authorizing final payment in the amount of $182,220.
Mr. Melvin or Mr. Hanson, anything to add, gentlemen?
A month ago, we came with the past change order. This is for the final work. This will be the final change order for this project. We have finished adding areas to be constructed. So this will finalize the concrete project and recommend final pay for the contractor.
Mr. Ertz?
I did notice a lot of extra areas that were put in, at least in my ward, as we have walked around. And so I do know this change order wasn't for an increase in the cost of what was done, of what was scheduled to be done. It's because a lot more work was done. Am I correct in that?
Correct. Yeah, we did do a lot more work.
A lot of ramps. 82nd Street was one area I know.
It's sad to say there's a lot more we can still do.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to say when to stop, isn't it? But I appreciate the keeping an eye on it. I appreciate you and Dave Aldermen going out and taking a look and being very much a part of the group that and watching what's going on out there. I think you guys do a good job of overseeing this, and I have no problem making a motion to approve because of that.
Got a motion made and seconded by Ms. Melson. Discussion before we vote on item number 6. Call the vote, please.
Alderman Ertz,
Yes.
Alderman Melson,
Yes.
Alderman Mock,
Yes.
Alderman Josh Green,
Yes.
Alderman Lightfoot,
Yes.
Alderman Jason Green,
Yes.
Alderman Van Buskirk,
Yes.
Alderman Kramer,
Yes.
Alderman Emerson,
Yes.
Our City Marshal, Jim Lynch. Any comments, sir, after the clerk reads the ordinance or reads the resolution?
a resolution authorizing and approving an expenditure of funds with MDL Technology LLC for information technology-related services for fiscal year 2014-2015 in an amount not to exceed $122,880.
It's always good to keep you all on your toes. Mr. Lynch, anything you'd like to add, sir?
We're asking the board tonight to authorize spending in excess of $15,000 with one vendor per city policy. This is a contract that was approved in the 2012-13 budget. Budget amount is $122,880. So we're asking for approval to spend over $15,000 with one vendor.
Questions of Mr. Lynch? Mr. Ertz?
Thank you. I believe this is a multi-year contract, and therefore it's kind of, we're just re-upping it. Do you know what year we're in on that?
It's a 3-year agreement, and it was approved by this board in 2012-2013 budget year. There'd be probably a lot of things. I believe we have the jail contract coming and up, and we have contracts with them, but typically we're coming for approval with spending with one vendor $15,000. So
With a number this large, have you considered hiring somebody in-house that would just do that? I mean, for $122,000.
but we had somebody in-house.
Okay. And this is
It is a longer story, but we felt that this is working.
You have considered as well, yeah. This is working well, and there's different probably expertises for different jobs that perhaps one person would not be able to do, I would imagine. But just so long as you're looking into ways to save money, I appreciate that.
Understood. Thank you.
Mr. Van Buskirk? And a motion been made by Mr. Van Buskirk, seconded by Mr. Ertz. Discussion before we vote on item number 7. Call the vote, please.
Alderman Van Buskirk,
Yes.
Alderman Ertz,
Yes.
Alderman Melson,
Yes.
Alderman Lightfoot,
Yes.
Alderman Mock,
Yes.
Alderman Josh Green,
Yes.
Alderman Kramer,
Yes.
Alderman Jason Green, Alderman Emerson,
Yes.
Second reading on number 8, please.
An ordinance establishing the compensation for the office of mayor for the term beginning April 2015.
Anything you'd like to say in addition to that?
Nothing at all, sir.
I will say that the motion made last week to, the previous meeting, to keep the amount of compensation for the expenses as it has been, I think is fair and equitable, and I fully support it. So, any action, Ms. Emerson? The motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? This is the second reading. Call the vote, please.
Alderman Emerson,
Yes.
Alderman Kramer,
Yes.
Alderman Jason Green, Alderman Van Busker,
Yes.
Alderman Josh Green,
Yes.
Alderman Ertz,
Yes.
Alderman Mock,
Yes.
Alderman Nelson,
Yes.
Alderman Lightfoot.
Pass.
Alderman-
You've been around the horn, I think. You wanna...
Okay.
No, it was amended at the last meeting to keep it at $200 rather than the recommended $250.
Correct.
So this voting yes would be to keep it at the $200 per month for car allowance. All right, very good. All votes are in then. Please perform the second reading on item number 9, please.
An ordinance establishing the compensation for the office of city collector for the term beginning April 2015.
Anything you'd like to add on that, Ms. Henry?
Nothing at this time.
Discussion or action on item number 9 for the second reading. Mr. Kramer?
Motion to approve.
Mr. Kramer's got the motion to approve, second by Ms. Emerson. Mr. Mock? Discussion. You can't hit your button and then take it back off. Well, yeah, you lit up as if to say, want to say something, and then you pulled it back. For those in the viewing audience here, we for years have operated under the premise where we put a bottle of water up here to signify that you want to speak. Well, now we actually have, in part of the new technology, we actually have lights that light up when each of the aldermen want to say something. So it's very helpful. But we're getting used to it, so that's part of the problem. And Mock is still messing with his light here. So. All right, business to do here. We've got motions made and seconded. Ask the clerk to perform the reading on item number 9, please.
Alderman Kramer,
Yes.
Alderman Emerson,
Yes.
Alderman Josh Green,
Yes.
Alderman Jason Green, Alderman Nelson,
Yes.
Alderman Ertz,
Yes.
Alderman Van Busker,
Yes.
Alderman Mock,
Yes.
Alderman Lightfoot,
Yes.
Perform the second reading on item number 10, please.
an ordinance establishing the compensation for the office of Board of Aldermen for the term beginning April 2015.
See how much debate we get on this one. Discussion?
Motion to approve.
Mr. Kramer's got the motion to approve, seconded by Mr. Josh Green. Discussion before we vote on item number 10. Mr. Ertz?
Just again, this is keeping things as they are, so
That's correct.
just to mention that. Thank you.
Correct. All right, no further discussion. Call the vote, please.
Alderman Kramer,
Yes.
Alderman Josh Green,
Yes.
Alderman Lightfoot,
Yes.
Alderman Mock,
Yes.
Alderman Van Busker,
Yes.
Alderman Ertz,
Yes.
Alderman Nelson,
Yes.
Alderman Emerson,
Yes.
Alderman Jason Green.
All right, ask the clerk to perform the first reading on item number 11, please.
An ordinance approving the First Amendment to the redevelopment contract between the Raytown Community Betterment Redevelopment Corporation and the City of Raytown, Missouri for the Partners Stark Assisted Living Redevelopment Project as adopted by ordinance number 4193-96.
Mr. Benson is our Director of Development and Public Affairs. Anything you'd like to add, sir?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. The city of Raytown entered into a contract with the Raytown Community Betterment Redevelopment Corporation on May 9th of 1997 for the development of what was called Partners Stark Assisted Living Redevelopment Project, which is today more commonly known as Elliott Place. The contract, which was included in your packet, provides for tax abatement of the redevelopment of that property, which the contract identified was to occur in 3 phases. Phase 1 of the contract, as proposed in the contract, has been completed and is basically what you see out there today when you drive through Elliott Place. That included also roadway improvements to portions of Maple Avenue that the city completed, with costs being contributed by the developer at that time. Phase 2, which has not yet been constructed, provides for construction of 48 assisted living apartments or apartment units that are to be located directly west of the existing buildings. And Phase 3 is to provide for construction of 24 assisted living apartment units that's to be located near the northwest corner of the property. Also, Phase 3 calls for construction of a bed and breakfast large enough to accommodate 5 or fewer families, as well as a storage area for use by the residents residing in the 3 phases. Phase 1 and the corresponding improvements to Maple Avenue were, as I mentioned, constructed as part of Phase 1 and is currently receiving tax abatement for the development for a 20-year period. Phase 2 and 3, however, which I mentioned have not yet been constructed, are under the contract were to be eligible for a tax abatement also. Those phases, the contract stipulates a time frame in which those phases were to be constructed, which has since lapsed. They've missed that time frame for the construction of those 2 phases. Therefore, those 2 phases currently are not eligible for tax abatement should they be constructed. There is an offer to sell, or to purchase rather, Elliott Place from the current owner, and as part of that, they are proposing this amendment to the contract. There's five parts to the amendment. First is to clarify and define the term assisted living apartment units so that it identifies or can include independent living apartments, assisted living apartment units, memory care apartment units, and skilled nursing care apartment units. The second change or amendment is that Phase 3 may consist of construction of 48 assisted living apartment units, which represents an increase of 24 additional assisted living apartment units from the current contract. The increase in the number of apartment units would also require approval of an amendment to the development plan through the zoning process, which would have to go through the Planning Commission and then come before you for approval as part of that process. 3, the city does not find that they're asking that the city not find Phase 2 and Phase 3 to be in default of the redevelopment contract, and therefore still be eligible to receive tax abatement upon construction of those 2 phases. The 4th, what's in your staff report that you received tonight, there's a modification to that. That's actually a combination of 2 requests. So the modified request is that they are requesting to extend the time frame in which the phases 1, 2, and 3 are eligible. Phases 2 and 3 are to be completed to 5 years from the date of approval of the amendment. And then 5th, that the extension of the abatement period for phases 1, 2, and 3 for an additional 5 years, thereby extending the abatement period from a 20-year abatement to a 25-year abatement. So, the applicant, or the current owner rather, of Elliott Place is here tonight, Mr. Ken Blom, as well as the purchaser of the development. So they may be able to provide, or not may, they can provide further details or greater detail of the project, but I'd be happy to answer any questions at this point if you have any for me.
Questions, Mr. Benson, before we go to Mr. Bloom? Shirts.
What was the original reason for the abatements?
Mr. Blom may be able to answer that question better than I, but prior to that, used from looking through the documents, it had been a shooting range, and so it was to mediate lead in the soil and the property that's in the condition it had been. And Mr. Blom, as I said, can probably answer that question in greater detail. Okay.
Mr. Van Buskirk.
That's correct. It's currently in place today. That's correct. If phase 2 and 3, they could still be constructed today, or let's say later next year or at some point. They're just under this contract. Those 2 phases are not eligible to receive tax abatement. The page is that? On page 8 of the contract, phase 2 was to be completed in 30 months from the date of the contract approval, and phase 3 was to be completed within 42 months from the date of approval. Correct. Uh, 1997 is when the contract was approved. I don't know when the actual construction began. I'm going to defer to Mr. Blom for that.
Mr. Lightfoot, you want to defer or you want to wait? Mr. Lightfoot.
Sorry, were you talking about the original owner or the purchaser?
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and ask Mr. Ken Blum if he'd come forward. I think, Ken, you've got a fair amount of explanation on this. It'll probably clear a lot of things up for us.
Ken, thank you. For the record, my name is Ken Blom. I'm president of Stratford Development Corporation. The address is 9600 East 53rd Street, Raytown, Missouri, 64133. I want to thank the board and mayor for allowing this on the agenda tonight. Obviously a very important issue for us, and I'll explain why. It's impossible to understand, I think, the reason for the request for the amendment without giving some history. And if you'll indulge me for a little bit, let me do this. Let me give you a timeline and kind of a concise history of the project and the property, which will give you a basic understanding. And from there, if I've skipped over areas, which I'm sure I will, that I can fill in the gaps, I'd be glad to do that. But I think I can get started by just giving you a timeline and kind of some of the reasoning for what brings us here tonight to ask the amendment. So the history of the property actually goes back, and I need to start back in 1934, believe it or not. So for most of you that have been around Raytown for a period of time, you'll remember that the site of Elliott Place was once the site of Elliott Shooting Park, which for those that enjoy looking at Raytown history, you'll enjoy reading should enjoy reading the history of the park. It was a nationally recognized shooting park, tons of history, a lot of famous people shot there. And the Elliott Shooting Park officially began in Raytown, I believe, in 1934, and operated until about 1983 or 84. Actually, I think the last shot was fired in 1984 as a ceremony. So roughly 50 years of history as a shooting park in the city of Raytown. In 1984, about the year that the shooting park closed, the property was deeded back to the lender on the project, which was Boatman's Bank. The short story, a version of that story, was that Boatman's Bank had made a loan on a commercial piece of property to the owner of the shooting park. The owner of the commercial property offered as additional collateral the shooting park, cross-collateralizing the original loan. Boatman's Bank ended up foreclosing on the commercial property in 1984, and along with repossessing the commercial building, they also repossessed the shooting park, which became the end of Elliott Shooting Park in Raytown. The shooting park, the gun club that existed there, has since moved to Smithville, Missouri. After Boatman's Bank foreclosed, the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, stepped in and went to Boatman's Bank and said, "No, by the way, the shooting park is full of lead contamination from the lead shot that was originally used to shoot live pigeons and eventually clay pigeons on the site." Boatman's then, as being the current owner and probably the only owner that was financially responsible for the property, or could be financially responsible for the property, ended up being stuck with the remediation of the lead on the site. And so, as the story is told to me, and as the records seem to indicate from Boatman's files, Boatman's got stuck with the cost of about $1.2 million to clean up the lead off the site of the old Elliott Shooting Park. About that time, our company had previously developed Hidden Lake Care Center, and we were looking for property to expand. To give you an example, at Hidden Lake we had 24 independent living apartments. In the early 90s, we had a waiting list of probably 50 or 60 people waiting for one of those units to open up so that they could occupy an independent living senior apartment. And we were looking for additional ground in Raytown to develop, had approached Boatman's Bank because at the time I believe that this tract was the largest undeveloped piece of property in the city limits, and we had a desire to continue developing in Raytown. We approached Boatman's about the possibility of buying the property. At the time, they said it wasn't for sale. About 6 months later, I drove by the property. There was a real estate sign on the property. We ended up, longer story made short, we ended up writing a contract to purchase the property. Boatman's had some restricted uses for the property if they were going to sell it, and it's then that we learned the story of the lead contamination and the stories behind it. As looking at the property, and as we kind of examined the possibility for developments and considered all the components needed to develop the property, one of our concerns obviously was the history, but then the remaining cleanup of the property, some of which is defined in the redevelopment agreement. We had concerns about finding a lender that would take the risk on the property. And our strategy at that point was to contact Dick King of King Hershey. His firm did a lot of city work, including the city of Raytown, did a lot of tax incentive work back then, and we contacted the city, had meetings with the city, and ended up in May of 1997 agreeing with a tax abatement program for the site. And in conjunction with that, obviously, was developed the redevelopment contract that we're all speaking about tonight. So that brings you up to basically the 1997. In the redevelopment contract, I think there was a question about requirements of the abatement and the reasons for the abatement. It wasn't lead contaminations and some of the risks that was involved with that. But the redevelopment contract calls for our company, it says the company shall remove all existing foundations, pad sites, and deteriorated parking areas, preparing the redevelopment area for development through the removal of the berms left from the environmental remediation, improving access to the redevelopment area by extending and improving Maple, constructing internal streets necessary for traffic flow in the neighborhood and development of the redevelopment area, and extending utilities to the redevelopment area. When the city granted the tax abatement in 1997, and we signed the redevelopment contract, Stratford Development, which is the successor of a related company that we made application for the tax abatement, started development of the property. We, as was mentioned by Mr. Benson, we completed the first phase of the project in 1999. As was mentioned, that called for the building of 48 apartments, called for the improvement of the street through the project, the infrastructure and utility improvements, the landscaping requirements. It also required us to buy a piece of property from Dick Smith Ford, which would allow the continuation of Maple Street from 350 Highway at the light there, all the way to the northern border of Elliott Place. There was a gap, I think, of hundreds of feet. So we were required to purchase the property, and then also we were required, as part of the agreement, to contribute, I believe, $118,000 to the city to accomplish the street, actually creating a new street and repairing the old street as a continuation of the street clear to the northern edge of the property, so that we could have continuation through Elliott Place, clear through to 75th Street. We were also required to complete the kitchen building, all of which was completed under phase 1 of the contract. So in 1998, approximately, we made provisions to start looking forward to the completion of phase 2, which was, as again was mentioned by Mr. Benson, another 48 units of apartments. Our plan was that the plan for Elliott was similar to the plan that we developed at Hidden Lake. Hidden Lake, as most of you know, is a continuum of care project, which means that it offers independent living up to a skilled level of care. Elliott Place really became for us a way to expand the services that we were offering at Hidden Lake in a different location that was still close proximity to the original location of Hidden Lake, where we could cross-market and use Hidden Lake's contacts to also fill another type of continuum of care project. So the concept behind Elliott Place is that we would begin with strictly independent living apartments, which we did. The first 2 buildings were built were strictly independent. There was no services involved other than the normal services like emergency contacts and those things, which are typical in a senior living complex. The next 2 buildings added services. We had meal services and housekeeping and some other ancillary type services. So as we began preparing for phase 2, the concept for us was that we were going to develop a higher level of care than what existed, and some of which would depend upon market demand at the time that they were to be constructed. And the strategy that we started down the path of was that we were trying to develop in those next 48 units a concept that currently did not exist, and still I don't believe exists in the state of Missouri. But our strategy was that we bought the license of a 45-bed nursing home in the Midtown area that was a dilapidated, closed nursing home. And I'm going to skip over some of the longer explanations. If you need me to come back to explain any of the things that I've stated, I'll be glad to fill in the gaps. But for sake of time, at least initially, let me kind of use some terminology. If you have questions about the terminology, I'll come back and explain further. But the idea was to buy some licensed beds, go through the certificate of need process in the state of Missouri, and the product that we wanted to develop at Elliott in the second phase was something that was totally unique. We wanted to build units, 48 in this case, units for particularly spouses. The case where a spouse perhaps one spouse could live independently and was able to live independently, the other spouse needed more care, in some cases nursing home care. And we were going to try to develop a new product that involved both a communion per se of independent living and skilled nursing care. We purchased a license in 1998 with the intention of moving it to Elliott Place. Started down the path of the certificate of need process. The reality was that we could not get state regulators to figure out that concept or figure out how they would monitor and inspect that type of product. I spent probably a year trying to sell that type of product as a necessity in the marketplace, and we basically struck out with the state and our ability to create that type of product. In the meantime, we were able, fortunately, to acquire 2 other lots next to Hidden Lake that we were able to move those licenses to, so that the cost of the purchase of those licenses was not wasted. We were actually able to use those, and evidence of that fact is that in the year 2000, we opened up a new became a 49 skilled new nursing facility at Hidden Lake, which deferred our progress on the Elliott Place completion of phase 2. So the intention, at least on phase 2, was to develop that in a special way under the time frames. Could not get regulatory approval to do that. Ended up using those licenses, and in reality, from a city's perspective, at least the way that we view it, the 49-bed skilled facility went on the tax rolls immediately. Had it been built during the abated period of Elliott Place, it would have had abatement for probably another 14, 15, 16 years. So from a city perspective, the city actually gained from a tax perspective on that project, although it caused us to default on phase 2, the time frame on phase 2. So carrying forward a few years, there were some changes within our company. We had 2 of our stockholders that died in that decade. We had a change of market demand. There was the introduction of Bickford Place in Raytown, and eventually the introduction of Jessica Estates, which added more independent living units. And quite honestly, during that, the first half of 2000, our company was pretty consumed with absorbing the amount of construction and development we had done the previous decade. I think between 1991 and 2001, our company built and developed about $18 million worth of new construction in Raytown. And in that first half of 2000, we also opened another skilled nursing facility just east of Raytown called Seasons Care Center, which is a skilled nursing facility that specialized exclusively in Alzheimer's care. So we had a lot going on at that time. We had some change in the stockholders, we had some change in market conditions, and then when obviously the recession hit, everybody's world changed in 2007. For our own company, we made the decision in 2012 to exit the skilled nursing business. We sold Hidden Lake, we sold Seasons, our Alzheimer's facility, and during that recession, our concentration was on restoring the census of Elliott Place. What may not be known as far as how the recession affected our company was that of the aspects of our company that were most affected by the recession, independent living took the greatest hit, and oftentimes people ask me why, and it's really a pretty logical explanation. Correlating with the housing crisis and people's inability to sell their homes, people did not, if they could not sell their houses, they did not move into senior living. And for 3-4 years, the phone calls stopped, and nobody was building the product, nobody was occupying the product. It's not a Raytown issue, it was a national issue. So what we worked on those last years and these last years has been restoring the occupancy of Elliott Place back to some type of normalcy. Before the recession, Elliott Place ran consistently about 92 to 95% occupancy rate. During the recession, we dipped as low as 55 to 60%. Occupancy really did not restore itself until probably late 2013. 2014 has been the first year that we have restored back to normal occupancy. So in this process, somewhere in 2013, we were approached by a company who had an interest in Elliott Place. Called us up, said, you know, we've known about your project. We're doing acquisitions. Do you have any interest in selling Elliott Place? My answer at that point was, obviously there's been some changes in our stockholder base. There's been some change of focus with our company, the remaining stockholders. There's been an effect of the economy. We have an interest, but I'm not sure that we're ready to, because we want to make sure that if and when we sell, that we at least get back to a normal occupancy where we can have the opportunity to get our value back out of the project. We continued discussions, and eventually in 2014 we got together. Several months ago we signed a purchase agreement, and in this process of going through the due diligence that's related to the sale, this is when this issue came up about the redevelopment contract. So this kind of brings us up to a current date, and the reason that we're here tonight making this request for the amendment change. As we went through this project and went through the due diligence, we got through most things fairly easily. We got to the issue of two things that always concern us, that if we ever decided to sell Elliott Place, there's two things that, well, there's more than two things, but there's two major things that we felt were made it difficult for people. Number one, to get their hands around and arms around and the thought process and understand the tax abatement related to it. Secondly, it's always been a question of it's never been a question of being able to sell the project, but it's always been the issue of finding somebody that not only is willing to own and operate an independent living project in a manner that we would approve of, from the standpoint that they're good operators, they care about the employees, they care about the residents. But the kicker to that is finding somebody who also has the means and the ability and the motivation and particularly the financial ability to continue the project and develop it out. So when we started the due diligence, there became some sticking points on the redevelopment contract as they reviewed it, and they came to us and said, and Kevin Kasich from the acquiring company, Titan Real Estate, is here tonight. I'd like to introduce him briefly at the end here if I could. But they said, look, here's the deal. We understand this. We understand the tax abatement. We understand everything else. What we want to have happen is that we don't want to commit to buying a property that we understand the community plan, the plan unit development, the planned overlay, whatever it's called today. It's progressed in terminology through the years from what it used to be. But we want to make sure that there's no restrictions on us to be able to build out the project based on technical defaults that you have happened in the redevelopment contract you had with the city. And they came to us and said, doesn't it make sense for us just to get some of these things corrected before we take over ownership so that we know that we're not buying a piece of property that we can't develop? And so we started looking, and they had separately some conversations with the city staff, and I would be remiss if I didn't thank Joe Willerth, the city attorney, John Benson, the city staff of their help in helping us prepare for this meeting and try to get some of these things in order. But we started looking at these things that we were in default for. We were default in the fact that we never got a letter of completion from the city that we had actually completed phase one, which we did. And so we have since corrected that default. It came to the other default, which was basically the fact that we failed to get an extension on phase 2 and phase 3, which the redevelopment contract allows for. We simply just didn't do it. So it was our mistake not to request an extension of the phases. From their perspective, they're not so concerned that we're in default, and they're not so concerned about the fact that the phase 1 that exists has tax abatement. There's not really any question to that. They just want to be put in a position where a reasonable position from our perspective also, that in going forward after the closing on the property, that there's nothing in that redevelopment contract that prevents them from building out the project. Obviously, they're not going to hit the time frame of the original redevelopment contract, but they said, I think we can finish the project in 5 years. And so the reason for the amendment is that they said, well, let us draft an amendment, let us present it to the city, let's talk about these things and see if we can get these things done. All we want to do is have the flexibility to do this. So they're asking us to correct our default in whatever manner that's necessary, and the method that we have chosen to use is to present an amendment to the redevelopment contract. Whether that's the right direction to do or the right procedure or not, that's the procedure that both attorneys felt was the most reasonable approach. The second thing is that they wanted, the second main thing when they came to us is said, you know, market conditions have changed, terminology has changed. And granted, from 1997, the definition of assisted living totally means something different than what it means today. And they basically said, we want the flexibility of being able to do as you intended to do some years ago. If we want to build a continuum of care project, we want the ability to put some memory care in there, or to provide some unique care that provides a continuous of care so people can stay on the project or within the project as they age in place, at least age on the same project. We want the ability to do that. We don't want restrictions, and just want to make sure that we can redefine that or clarify that with the city. And they also wanted to ratify the existing tax abatement agreement as it existed. And so all of these things we felt were reasonable for anybody seeking to buy a project. And the main reason was that they said that, you know, we just want the ability and the flexibility to do anything. Obviously, if they came back and modified the plan unit development, it would have to go through the Planning and Zoning Commission for a modification of the plan. They understand that. They're just trying to define these things to make sure that when they take over the project and begin construction, that we have basically cleaned the slate for them from our defaults of the original redevelopment contract. So in a nutshell, basically that's what happened, is what led to this amendment. Bottom line is this, from my perspective, and you can take my perspective for what it's worth. Obviously, I'm biased in this situation. The reality is this: our company, the focus of our company, with the stockholder change, with the death of some of our stockholders, with the redirection of some of the remaining stockholders, it's very realistic to say that Stratford Development Corporation is not going to finish the project. We don't have the means. The lender situation has changed with us. The economy has changed things with us. The age of our stockholders has changed things with us. Stratford Development is not going to continue to develop at this size of project. When we met the folks from Titan, we felt very comfortable with them. They have tremendous experience in operating independent living facilities. More importantly, from the city's perspective, again, my perspective of the city's perspective, is that they have clearly the financial means and the ability to complete the project. So regardless of your decision on this amendment, one thing probably should be clear, and I should make clear, is that without this option, Stratford Development does not have the ability to complete the project. The positive news from that perspective is that we found a partner to assume the project, who we think very highly of, thinks a great fit for Raytown, and does have the ability. And in my mind, for those of you that have known me for many, many years, you'll understand that the perspective from which I say this, I have a tremendous desire to end well in my career. And it's not that I'm at the end of my career. I have many years left to work, but this phase of my career, it's important for me to find a company that we can hand off a project to, that we can trust to do what they say, that trust them with our employees, who they would keep, trust them with our residents. And so this gives you maybe a different perspective of the reason and the motivation of the amendment. Again, I'd be glad to answer any other specific questions and fill in some of these gaps, but if I could just momentarily, could I introduce Kevin? Would you mind? And then Kevin could do a couple things. He can either confirm or add to or deny anything I said, but from that perspective, at least he traveled from California to make the meeting tonight, so I think at least I'd like him to meet the board. So Kevin Case. Go ahead.
Thank you. Kevin, did you bring the cold weather with you?
I had nothing to do with this. I think I left, it was 65, which was yesterday, I guess, here. The board, thank you very much for giving me a couple moments. I can't even compare what Ken just went through. I thought it was very clear, concise. In a very short nutshell, what he's saying is accurate to what our desire is. We're a small company, we're very entrepreneurial. We have about 300 employees, which is a lot, but it's spread throughout the country, 6,500 apartment units. We probably have about 1,200 senior housing. We love this business. We just bought in St. Joe. We're going to be in the Midwest for our senior housing, because the guys we hired to run it came out of the Midwest, so this is our focus. Development is going to be just a fraction of what we do. Typically, we like the existing. We keep the people in place, because it's not just about returns, it's about people, it's about caring for residents. So what we're going to do is we have plans to upgrade Elliott from the building, and the mechanics are in great shape, but we want to take it to add additional level of services, more meals, more activities. So there's about 15 or 16 people that are employed by Elliott Place, and our intention is probably within 6 months, add another 2 to 3. to just continue to make that something, something special. Because I think it is such a little oasis out there, and I think that what we're talking about, the development piece is critical to us, because I think there's this, our belief is a continuum of care. And having people, you start with the independent living, lower on the acuity scale, but to be able to offer assisted memory care. We're asking for skilled nursing. That's a whole nother situation. I don't think we're going to go there. I think we're going to keep it on the smaller side and the lower acuity side. So I think it's very important for us. The only thing maybe Ken missed is we are set to close on the first week of December. Your decision, your vote here will not affect it. We are going ahead with that part, but obviously the development piece is very important, and we'd love to have clarity, as you can imagine, being the out-of-towners. Ken and his partners have been nothing but straight up with us, and it's been enjoyable to work with. So if there's anything I can answer now or in the future, I'd be glad to leave my business card, and anybody's welcome to call me.
Okay, thank you, sir. Let me ask the board, Mr. Van Buskirk, you've been very patient. Do you have a question of either of these gentlemen, sir?
Sure. Certainly, the relationship
Thank you.
Is this sale contingent?
The sale is, and Kevin alluded to this, the sale of the existing apartments that as it appears today is not contingent upon any of this. The abatement is not that much longer anyway. The one piece that I didn't mention, which is in regard to your question in the tax abatement, we have a little bit of history with the county on tax abatement. Back in 2001, I believe, get my dates right, 2000 to 2001, we had we received a tax bill in the mail that was basically a non-abated tax bill. What happened was I called Dick King up and said, Dick, what's the issue here? We got this bill. Talked to the county folks. Bless their hearts, I think they try very hard, but they made a mistake. We believe they made a mistake. We ended up Dick said to me, he said, we'll win this, but we have to begin litigation against the county to get this straightened out. So what happened was that we had to sue the city. We won. The city, and I don't know, John, if this copy of the settlement agreement has been provided to anybody, but let me just tell you the basics of it. So when we settled the lawsuit, we had a couple of years that we paid more than the abated of taxes, and we paid them, but in the course of the settlement of the lawsuit, the city or the county provided a settlement agreement which actually allowed for abatement to run through 2022, which was defined in the settlement agreement. There's some, and this may be a city attorney question, but there's some question whether that settlement agreement doesn't override or supersede what existed in the redevelopment contract. So the 2022 versus the 2017, the last 5 years of the abatement, however, based on the county's settlement agreement, still called for 100% pilots to be paid. So really there was really no difference than what the county determined to be true and ratified in their settlement agreement versus what was in the redevelopment contract. So to answer your question, it doesn't affect the first phase of the development at all. I think all of us involved in this conversation did not believe that the tax abatement really affected phase one at all, the existing 48 apartments, the kitchen building, those things. What I think what Titan is trying, what Kevin's trying to achieve through here is that simply ratifying what's existing on the property. He's not asking for anything more or anything additional, but the sale of the development property is contingent upon us getting some of these issues cleaned up. And again, Kevin alluded to it, but to put it in his perspective and to walk in his shoes for a minute, and as a developer, I understand completely what he's talking about. He's from California, doesn't know Raytown. He's become familiar with Raytown. He's met quite a few people here since he's been here. But he certainly as managing member of a company does not want to be in a position where he steps in and buys and agrees to close on the undeveloped portion of the property with any uncertainty at all. He's had conversations with city staff. I believe he feels comfortable with them. So really what he's trying to do is to clarify and ratify what already exists on the project. Really the only default that I think that we are technically guilty of is the fact that we failed to ask for an extension of the time for phase 2 and 3. It's something, again, that was provided for in the redevelopment contract. It probably could have been granted by the city if we'd made the request. We simply screwed up and failed to make the request. We had a lot of things going at the time. And so I think maybe hopefully that answered your question. I don't believe it affects the closing on December 8th of Elliott Place, what exists, but it does have certainly ramifications for their ability to buy the second, or the undeveloped part of that property and continue the development of that
So
piece.
the abatement portion of this would be important related to the development of the other phases?
Yes, it would. I think so. And it's not so much that they're asking for anything more than what already exists. They're just asking for ratification of what already exists in our mind.
Are those areas still considered blighted?
Those areas were part of the blighted remediation that we were required to do under the redevelopment contract. So the blight has been removed by us as it was determined or clarified or described in the redevelopment contract.
So the blight has already been removed
Yes.
from where phase 1 and phase 2 would have been?
The blight was required to be removed per the definition of the redevelopment contract. That was required to be done by the completion of phase 1.
Will you still have any involvement with this?
No.
If the sale is made?
No, and that's why it's important for us to turn over operations to somebody that makes a commitment to keep employees. We have employees over there that have worked for us for probably at least one that's worked for us for 20-some years, and many of them have worked for us multiple years. And it's one of those discussions that we had with a new company. And let me make it real clear too, if I didn't clarify this, we had no intention to list the property. We had not listed it for sale. This is one of those circumstances where somebody's approached us and say, you know, we like what you're doing. We're interested in the Midwest. We like Raytown. Would you be interested? And this was not a process that we made a decision overnight. This has been conversations that have been going on for months, if not a year or longer.
Well, I think the potential there is tremendous, certainly, and we would all like to see all of that developed, or I certainly would, and I think I speak for everyone else.
We were, Kevin and I were talking on the phone the other night and talking about, you know, how do we put a dollar figure to this? And I think if I simply take the square footage price of what was originally planned with the 3 buildings and add some of the ancillary building and forget about the storage units and those type of things as far as dollar value, I think it truly does add probably another $5 or $6 million of construction that will soon go fully back on the tax rolls of Raytown. You know, under the agreement, there's a few years left of tax abatement. You have to look at it from a realistic standpoint. If they took over the project, if they begin if they had their plans ready and they were ready to go and they went through the planning and zoning process, if they needed to do that. I mean, by the end of this process and by the time they get buildings completed, you're looking at a minimal tax effect anyway, because it's so soon going back to a tax abatement or a full tax basis. So it's, in my perspective, and Kevin can clarify if I've misspoken for his perspective, but it's really a win-win situation if the community really wants to see the project develop. They're not really asking for anything more than what actually exists on the project, was originally intended for the project. They are asking for clarification from the standpoint that they would like 5 years to complete the project, because obviously they're trying not to be in default of the original redevelopment contract as well. Even if we correct the default as we have caused it, they want to make sure that they don't also create a default based on what's already been written without the modifications thereof.
Certainly, if this development went forward, I think it's something that should be monitored closely by our city, and making sure that, you know, that everything is in full compliance with whatever contractual agreement you would have with our city. But I noticed that initially there was a possibility of a bed and breakfast developing there. Is there still any?
It was defined in the, ironically, it was defined, I don't think we made that definition, but in the, I know in the redevelopment contract, it was defined as a bed and breakfast. I think at the time, is for sake of a better explanation or description. What we had intended, we had on our original plan unit development, along with the apartments, we added a smaller building that was comprised of about 5 units. What we were hoping to do with that 5 units, if necessary, the same way as with the storage units, if necessary, was we had situations through the years where people have a house to sell, we don't have an apartment open, they end up selling their house, they have no place to move, we don't like to lose those people. So we were calling at the time more transitional housing or short-term stays and that type of thing. The other thing that happens to us more frequently than we expected is we have family members that come into town and don't want to stay in a hotel, would rather stay somewhere on the project or in a unit. We actually, to address some of those concerns, have opened up a guest apartment during the recession, especially when we had open apartments. We'd furnish a guest apartment that we called a guest apartment, so that when family came in. So that was the original intention for that use, is that they could come in and be more short-term stay and that type of thing for family members.
Well, I was thinking along that line for visitors certainly. I would like to see some type of, if this is approved, I would like to see some type of, certainly a clawback if all the development is not completed. I think that would need to be a part of it, certainly, because if there's a commitment from us, and there needs to be a commitment from the developer that everything will be completed, and especially if there are going to be, you know, tax abatements.
And I don't want to address that for Kevin, but I believe that Kevin probably would agree with that principle also.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
All right, we've got a lot of people that want to speak
You
here.
want to.
Mr. Ernst, you're up next.
Thank you. So in cleaning this up and to make this clearer, and I appreciate the history, that was pretty good to know what was going on up there. The abatement you're seeking isn't changing the original ending date of the abatement.
In my mind, it's not, based on the settlement agreement that we had with the county.
So 2017, basically, they would all end.
If you look at the settlement agreement with the county, and I'm keep in mind, I didn't draft the amendment.
Well, I know there's an argument of the 2017-2022,
right,
because of the lawsuit.
But essentially, if you look at the county's agreement, it extends it to 2022 from the 2017, but there's still the pilots that equalize the full tax effect in my mind.
Which takes that out.
Yeah, it's.
So phase 1 isn't being changed at all.
That's correct.
That went through, that's solid. That ends in 2017, 2022, whatever that argument goes for.
That's correct.
But even on the new developments, you're not asking to reset the clock and start another 20 years. You just want the original abatements to
be
as
ratified.
if this didn't have a time frame on. And so there, like you said, these abatements, it's not going to be like a 20-year abatement. This property will soon be on the tax rolls.
That is correct.
Very soon, especially because I know it will take a year or two to build, or like you said, it might take 5 years to build it, which right then you're done,
That's
with the
correct.
abatement. But it would be just taking advantage of the ending trailing part that was originally agreed to. Obviously, money was spent to clean up the property in its entirety. So
That's correct.
that's why I wanted to make clear that what the abatement was. And I believe that it's a property tax abatement on the improvements of the property. Is it like most other abatements we have, where the city still gets the tax money for the land as is?
The 353 state, the statute allows for that the taxation for the period is based on the tax year before the the actual tax of abatement took effect. So we would be taxed.
96.
Yes.
Okay. But very interesting. A lot of history's gonna have to be looked up for that, probably.
There's it's been an interesting project.
All right, thank you. I appreciate it.
Ms. Emerson.
It says the extension of the abatement period for 2 and 3 would be an additional 5 years.
And Kevin, do you want to address it? I mean, the way that I interpret that is that they're basically asking us to ratify the ruling of the county when we had the lawsuit. So again, it extended it 5 years, but that was the county's definition, even though the last 5 years had pilots that equaled the tax base. So do you understand?
No, I would agree. I think we have one document that says it's this, another one says it's that. It's 2017 or 2022, so we're looking for a little clarity.
So basically, the county says it would be 2022, but our records show 2017. Is this correct?
That is correct. The county's document's a little vague, but in the way that they spell it out, it ratifies it ratifies the tax abatement. It uses a date of 2022 instead of 2017, but it also calls for pilots to be paid at 100% value those last 5 years, which when you look at the difference, there really is no difference in the definition. They're still saying the same thing. 353 statute allows for 25 years of abatement. We were granted 20, but they're allowing 25, but again, in the last 5, it's at 100% pilot, so it's really a minimal difference, if any.
So you are paying the taxes for the last
They
few
would be,
years?
yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Josh Green.
Thank you. Excuse me. Well, the previous two pretty much answered the first question I had on that. I was just curious, on phase 2 and 3, is development essentially just kind of like the same plan that we had before?
Well, again, the process would have to be, and Kevin understands this, we've discussed this internally ourselves and also with the city staff. They have the ability to go in and build as we originally submitted, the footprint that we originally submitted under the redevelopment plan, and more appropriately, the planned unit development that we originally submitted to the city. We've always understand, we did Hidden Lake the same way. If there's any modification of the plan, it has to go back not just to the Board of Aldermen, it has to go back through planning and zoning. So any modification of that footprint requires a reprocess to the planning and zoning. So to Kevin's point, if they altered that, they understand, they certainly would like the flexibility to build something besides, or clarify that what they are able to build, but they understand clearly that if they have to go back and modify the building footprints as they exist, that would have to go back through planning and zoning, go through that process. And I believe, Mayor, you were head of planning and zone at the time that we did this project originally, which dates both of us.
Thank you very much.
That was probably not a compliment.
The hair was not gray then.
Yeah. I had another question for staff as well, and this is just off the top of my head because I just thought of this a little bit earlier. If I'm recollecting correctly, wasn't there about 6 to 9 months ago, didn't Jessica Estates come to us for like a expansion or a plat approval or something like that? I was just curious if there was a tax abatement on that as well or no.
There's no tax abatement on Jessica Estates. I don't recall Jessica Estates coming back before this board recently. You might be thinking of Willow Bend that is under construction,
okay.
51st and
I was just thinking one of them going,
which is another senior housing project though. It's very similar to Elliott Place and Jessica Estates.
I was just curious.
But do understand the distinction too.
Oh yeah, no.
That the Jessica and the new project are not tax abatement, but they are based on tax credits because of the qualification for the residents. So they have they don't have abatement per se, but they do have tax incentives to be able to create that type of housing, if that makes sense. Yeah. In some ways it's competition, in other ways it's not, because it's marginal sometimes that some of our residents at Elliott Place may not even qualify to live at those facilities, and some of the times those residents that do live there can afford to live at our places. So and that's why I think Kevin, as well as what our perspective would be, that if we were to build out Elliott, certainly you have to analyze the market conditions at the time. I think there's a saturation at this point with independent living, strictly independent living. There's certainly some flexibilities that come with assisted living, and there's certainly more flexibilities when you look at things like memory care and some of those things that Kevin's speaking of. I think he's not seeking any specific plan at this point, but would like the flexibility to be able to develop based on market conditions and what they identify as the major need to develop out the project. Albeit all of it would be senior housing related, and from a community standpoint or somebody driving through the project, they would not know any difference than looking at the units as if it were strictly all independent. We've discussed with Kevin the fact that from our perspective and our experience with the city that density may not be the major issue. It may be traffic concerns related to what they build out. And in the case of memory care and those types of licensed levels of care, actually the traffic may be less than what we proposed originally. So it may allow for, if the city would approve, higher density without creating greater traffic problems, may actually end up creating less traffic. So those are all things that Kevin's been made aware of in talking to ourselves and also talking with city staff.
And thank you for your comments, and thanks for that, and staff.
Ms. Melson.
First, I do appreciate the history, and I do remember a lot of that, and probably have some of that in my notes at home in the 2000s.
You're getting old just like the rest of us.
Well now.
But you look much better than David and I.
Good comeback. But I do want to thank you for the opportunity on the housing that you've provided for the older adults and the support you've provided for the older adults of the Raytown community. It's been very good. And my one concern, which has been brought up several times, is about the county suit and the city and who supersedes what, and how would that finally be determined? Whether it's 2017 or the 20...
I think this is probably a question for the city attorney. I think that from our perspective in looking at this, we see very little, if any, difference in the resolution of the county's agreement and the city's original agreement. There's a little bit different. Again, what or who supersedes the other, we don't know. And Kevin, I think, is looking more for clarification than he is for anything else. And the last argument with anybody over the tax abatement had to do was with the county, and their settlement agreement really ratified and confirmed a lot of things that were in the original document, but also were a little bit
confusing about the way it was stated, but from rereading it and re-looking at it, it looks like it's very similar to what was granted originally on the project.
Okay, and that's just my concern about this going forward, that there is that clarification if needed for this decision.
All right, this is the first reading. Mr. Benson, anything you'd like to add, sir?
I was just going to respond to Alderman Melson's comment or question there. I think that's the intent of the amendment, is to provide that clarification as just stated, so that there isn't, between 2017 and 2022, there's no question of which one supersedes which. And we're all on the same page, county and the city and them and us, that we're all working together.
Any other questions the board may have for these two gentlemen? Mr. Van Buskirk?
I have one quick, you talked about, use the term, gosh, if I can find it, memory care. What is that exactly?
You want to define it, or you want me to?
It's on the acuity scale of seniors from, if you would start and say, in layman's terms, you have senior apartments all the way up to skilled nursing. What used to be, people would go from a home all the way to skilled nursing. Now there are many different sectors along the way. So they've defined this, Alzheimer's would probably be the clearest way to say. People that have ability to just walk out of their home or an apartment and get lost and not know where they are. So there's certain requirements to go. State requirements tend to add up more. Down at the lower end of the acuity, it's really just senior apartments and some additional services, all the way up to, I think everybody knows what skilled nursing is and the regulations and the amount of care involved in it.
So it's related to dementia?
Yes, that's all the same thing.
That was my assumption, but I wanted clarification of that. So are we going to get clarification from our attorney related to the difference in the abatement time that we had set versus what the county has stated?
From what I can see in the documents, obviously I was not involved at the time. This wasn't even in the city documents, this settlement agreement. It appears there was an action between the developer and the county, and they reached an agreement that this abatement would extend to 2022. The city didn't intervene in that action, didn't object to that action, and so it's there, and we generally, the tax treatment flows down from the county as the city handles it each year. So we have an agreement that calls for this through 2017, but we have a superseding or a companion agreement that says it goes through 2022. At this point, it would be my recommendation, if you're going to approve the amendment, that we approve and make it clear that it's running through 2022. So in my opinion, legally, you have the discretion to either say, we agree with this, we want to see this project move ahead, so let's extend the tax abatement 5 years and their completion time 5 years. Or in the alternative, you could exercise your discretion to say, no, phases 2 and phases 3 were not completed timely, therefore our tax abatement agreement with Stratford is default. We want you to, staff, go declare it defaulted and over. But the staff never monitored or did that to this point, so we're leaving that to your discretion if that's what action you would want to do with respect to this. Based on, and the applicant may want to next time or present to the staff what the actual tax revenues or abatements are going to be, and I suspect that it will not be of great harm to the city tax-wise to approve this. Also, in terms, I was thinking about the clawback issue, and I don't think there's going to be any clawback because I don't think there's going to be an abatement until they complete the project. So they need to get it completed to get the additional on phases 2 and 3. So I really think it's analysis of, is this a win-win for the city to have phases 2 and 3 completed within the next 5 years? And if so, it seems to be an incentive to the one entity who says they would do it to have this amendment passed. but you don't have to approve it legally. I'm not telling you you have to approve it, it's there. Approving it will clean up this confusion in the status of the agreements, whether it's a 2017 or a 2022 agreement. I suspect that one, looking at it impartially, not trying to pick an angle, that probably a superseding agreement from the county that extended it to 2022 because of misapplications by the county of that early in this tax credit period would probably be affirmed by a court if we fought about it, but I see no reason to have a fight. I think my client either decides they should have this extension agreement because it's in the best interest of the city to encourage phase 2 and 3 in this quick 5-year period, or not to declare it over and not have a tax abatement and an extension.
Thank you, Mr. Willerth. That I think clarifies it for me. So it would be, if we want this development to go forward, it probably would be in our best interest to change our agreement to coincide with what the county had stated. Is that correct? And the 2022 would be what, 7 years off? Is that correct? And you're anticipating a completion of both phases in 5 years. Is that what I'm hearing? Okay, very good. Thank you.
All right, a lot of discussion, the last hour and 15 minutes on this one topic. This is the first reading, so we'll be taking it up again at the next meeting. Mr. Blum, it's always a pleasure to see you, sir.
Yeah, and again, I realize we had a shorter agenda than I looked like, and we confused and confounded that getting out early, but appreciate so much the time because it's really an important issue.
Sir, is admirable, so thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, we'll take this up on the second reading at the next meeting. That concludes the items on our agenda. Do I hear a motion to adjourn? Motion's been made and seconded to adjourn this meeting. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed. We are adjourned.